Okay, let's finish off. So, yeah, we're gonna take a look at our bulwark. Now, what? Okay, sorry guys, okay, fixed. So, yeah, let's take a look at this guy. And like, even just like from out here, you can kind of see that it's quite plain compared to a lot of the other designs. Like, even kind of like my tremor here is kind of falling into the same trap, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's doing that to the same extent as the Bulwark is. I don't know why, but that's just the way it feels. So, I mean, I like the design as it is. I like design for what it is, but in the context of everything else I've designed for this, it doesn't fit anymore. Like even the fuselage over here is kind of falling. It's kind of like right on the line. It could be better. Like it's definitely playing in some areas, and it could be better for what it is. But at the same time, it's not really that bad. So you just kind of want to leave it be. And so yeah, so you know, it's got to change. I've actually picked up the one of the prints I did of the Bulwark just to kind of have it handy as a nice little reference. So we won't do any changes here. Yeah, as you can see, this is my main collection file, and no, actually I should reorganize these a bit, because really this guy should be here, he should be all the way on the end. Anyways, so yeah, the Barracuda is not here yet, but oh geez, 1 second. I just realized I didn't open the other file first, so I can't get to it easily, so I gotta I don't want to really show all my files here because it's kind of like a big mix. So I've definitely got a few things I'd rather not show on the stream. Some are stuff like, private commissions, other projects that are essentially, dealing with, well, anyways. And just gotta wait. Oh, geez. There might be some problems. Oh, you know what I think it is? Because I updated to the last updated version of the program I'm using, and the problem is that like happened after I'd done like 80% of the proxy war designs. So trying to, and this is in particular a pretty old one. It was kind of from the original set, so that's not quite a year old, but getting close to it. Okay, it loaded, and it's not broken. So now we can come back. Bam. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do actually is save it as that. And then we're just going to get rid of this one. And let's just bring the grid back for this. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take in implicit, which is basically, so like it doesn't render out, it doesn't do anything essentially, which is great for when you want to keep track of kind of like how much space something took up, which is pretty much exactly what I want to do with this, because essentially the Bulwark is, at its heart, a meat shield. It's big, it's bulky, it's tough. It's got parallel essentially of little machine guns, but it's tough. So, you want to keep that size when you're designing something that's just a visual upgrade or revamping. So we'll just kind of pull that out, and there. So now, if we look here, we can kind of like get most of the angles without obscuring ourselves. So what do we want to look for in a redesign? Well, for one thing, I want to keep the plow, so I'm going to do the easy thing and just kind of take the plow. I'll probably be tweaking it and whatnot later, but for now it's a key component, so I want to hold on to that for now. And it does kind of like set the width nicely. Now, do I want to do one long track or the two smaller track pods? I think I'm just going to do one track. And I'm going to do it kind of like this. So these ones are about 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4 millimeters wide. I think I'll go one more even, so they'll be 5 millimeters wide. Oops, I did that wrong. Fixed. So a bit of space from the front, not too much. Bring that down a little bit. I mean, this is still basic shaping. Don't want it any higher than the plow. Basically want the tracks to be behind that, so they're essentially covered. Now I think I'll make the tracks just a bit shorter than kind of than that full hull will be, just to kind of like essentially tighten up the turning circle a little bit. And we'll just put one on the other side for now. Okay, that's cool. So now we kind of put the main hull in the middle, or at least start with that. Bam. Bam. Okay. See, looking at this now, it feels off. So what if I do this? Push this back a bit further still, going back on what I just said, and let's pull this in, and we're just going to drag this out for now, because this is actually not as tall as I'd like. Oops. I don't really know where the center is, so we'll just kind of wing it. Actually, let's just do it this way. Bam! And we'll put the center there. Haha! There. Because the thing is that, do I want to do it that way? Because that's, if like these cubes represent the actual track itself, we need to essentially cover them up a little bit. Oops. Good, good. Okay. Ugh, my eye is bugging me. Yeah, didn't really help. Oh well. Such is my life. Yeah, whoops. Didn't do that quite right. I didn't do that one quite right either. Whoops, did that wrong. Okay, gotta get back into it. So now we symmetrize that, and then, oops, do that locally. Okay, that's pretty good. I might even do a little cutout in here to show the track, but that would be kind of stupid to do, so I don't think I will. I think instead, we'll just kind of do a nice cut here, and then just bevel that. Yeah. So let's just, for giggles here, see, now here's like something I've noticed when I'm painting is that like these areas, not so much that they shouldn't be here as much as just like they're kind of awkward to deal with painting and with, you know, when it gets printed, powder getting stuck in there and stuff like that. So I need to keep in mind to actually essentially just not do stuff like that as much as possible. Even to the point where this might just kind of extend right out to the edge of the track, which I'm not sure how I feel about quite yet, but for now we'll just leave. And the gun. I'm not sure what I want to do with the turret. I kind of thought about doing two small turrets, because these are essentially just like two small little like plasma cannons, like kind of the same thing the little Badger has, which is actually very small compared to this. Like, I don't think it's even as tall as its turret, but it's barely as wide or anything like that. So, what I could maybe do is do like a two-stage turret. What I mean by that is like this. So we have like this out here. This actually will drop down a bit. Not too much. And this will kind of pop up a bit. So now what we'd have, see that's kind of having conflict here, but essentially, so we'd have turret here, and a turret up here. So this is the kind of thing where it's like, it's an interesting idea, I'm just not sure if it's actually any, you know, good. I kind of like it from like a gameplay sense because like I could even build in the front turret more into the hull, because what that means is that this gun is only going to get like, you know, so much rotation out of it because it's got essentially the other gun behind it in the hull. So it pretty much means that if you manage to ambush a bunch of these and come up from behind, they aren't helpless because, this gun is still nice and shooty back there, but they're at a reduced efficiency. And, oh damn, I forgot to start my timer. Let's just go with that. Okay, and I like that kind of unit design. Like, I love the idea where a unit is not always going to perform, like, a unit requires, like, something requires extra thought put into it in order to achieve the most out of it, and it's not, like, this has always been, like, a big comparison between, like, the Total Annihilation Supreme Commander style of games, whereas a unit, like in StarCraft, a unit is essentially defined by a couple numbers, like a couple stats, like its health, its armor, its damage output, but more importantly, its ability and its, you know, damage or unit type. So pretty much a Marine is great until you have something, like a Marine is great until you have something that is armored that the Marine doesn't do good damage against, and maybe it has like an attack that's better against biological things, stuff like that. I mean, like it's very like it's very kind of like almost binary. It's like, you know, if the enemy has, X, Y, or Z, then it's going to go bad for you. If he doesn't have X, Y, or Z, then it's going to probably go good for you unless the numbers are like, you know, 1 Marine versus 10 of something else instead of 10 Marines versus 10 something else's. But with something like this design with the 2 turrets, it's simply a case of how you deploy and how they deploy against you. It's not binary. It's, if you put all these at the front of your forces, at the front of your army, they're going to do good blocking, and as long as they charge you from head on, they're going to be able to do like their full damage. But if they're not, or if they are at the front of your army and you're attacked from the side, or God forbid from behind, they can still turn around. They can get both turrets on there, but there is a delay before that happens, and that's kind of like where, to me, like the real strategy game kind of comes into it. It's a case of, oh God, it's more than simply just, it's less of an equation. It's less of, I have unit type X and Y, ergo he's going to want to use unit types A and B to counter my X and Y units, ergo I will throw in some Z units to help counter that, and like it's less binary. Obviously it's, no one route in this sense, like no one path of design is right or wrong. It really depends on the specific game feel you're actually aiming for. And like one thing I've kind of realized as I've kind of tried to get into more games, stuff like that, is that sometimes for me and like what I'm good at, a game will devolve into, it'll stop being like a fun experience and start devolving into being, a mechanical experience, where like a good example of that is, to me, Five Nights at Freddy's. Five Nights at Freddy's, sorry. Like I love the story and the background, and exploring all that is great. But the actual playing of the game, especially as you try and get like later into the nights, it could just falls into a pattern where you're doing the pattern and you're not trying to play, it feels less like you're playing the game and more like you're just playing, you're basically doing like Simon Says, or like Bop It, it just gets faster and faster, and you just have to get it right, or that's it. And so that's why a game like Five Nights at Freddy's for me is a terrible game, but a wonderful experience to, delve into the backstory or watch someone else play. Like it was kind of the same thing with Soma. It's a game that, not to the same extent as Five Nights at Freddy's, but it's a game where I would not play it very well. But it's still a really great game to watch someone else play who can do that, who can play to that level. So, yeah, that was a bit of a tangent, but honestly, I kind of actually really like it. I'm sorry, it's starting to grow on me. I need to tweak a bunch of stuff in here, and probably even to the point of lowering this a little bit. And I got to figure out exactly what I'm doing with the tracks and kind of this area in here. But I like this. I think I will going to keep this as is. It pretty much fits the exact same thing. It's might be less plastic in the long run. I mean, like, it's obviously got the same rough footprint. We just pop this here, and in some areas it's actually bigger, some areas it's smaller. I think the biggest thing is the fact that I've got like this slope back here, and the turrets are going to take up a bit less room comparatively. A little bit. I don't know, I think this could work. Okay, so we'll stick with that then. I gotta save. I'm gonna get rid of this now. I don't think I really need it for anything specifically anymore. I am going to keep this, and I'm going to name it just so I know, but I'm going to hide it so it doesn't get in the way of me selecting things and whatnot. Alright. Now, let's start with... I'm going to be just kind of doing this very, like, fast and loose. I definitely kind of like where things are going, so I'm just gonna kind of let this in, like, in like a very kind of like, you know, hippie way. I'm just gonna let the unit kind of tell me what it needs and wants in terms of like detailing and stuff like that. Like something's gonna have to go here. I don't know what yet, but it's something I need to keep in mind. And one thing I need to decide for is the front turret. How much of a fire arc do I want it to have? Because I will physically build that into the model so that it is apparent from, it might not be specifically apparent from, like, you know, way up here looking down at it. Oops. Like, it might not be specifically apparent, but anytime you see it, like, even from here, you'll see that it's built up. It'll basically be like, yeah, okay, you guys get it, I get it, we're good. I'm gonna move on before I trip over myself anymore. And I think I'm gonna do like a nice cutout here. And my reasoning is that I want to make it even more apparent that it's kind of like quote unquote front loaded. So if I move as much kind of like mass as possible to the front, it helps kind of create that feeling of this is going to be hard to attack from the front. So we should try and attack it from the back, where there's like, oh look, there's like nothing back here. It's cut back. The tracks are exposed. Only one turret can shoot. I'm trying to like communicate that fact through more than just the gameplay, but also the like the aesthetic. Because like games like StarCraft, like, well, actually, in particular StarCraft, if every unit was just an icon and you knew what each icon was at any given time, you could play the game that way. Yes, like the actual visual design doesn't really matter. But something like Supreme Commander, while that's true to an extent, there are definitely some things that, you know, those essentially like icons do not communicate to you in a great sense. Like in Supreme Commander, turrets need to actually track their target. So, you know, they've got pitch speeds for the barrel, they got yaw speeds for the turret itself, they got like turning speeds, acceleration, deceleration. That's not all stuff you can track through just an icon. You can't see which way the turret is facing on an icon, or more accurately, you can't. I mean, like, you can. There's ways you can do stuff like that, but it's not quite as clear as would be with actually just looking at the model and seeing where it's pointed. So and I mean, I do this with a lot of my designs, and I might take a little bit of time to actually go back and actually, yeah, you know what? So this is good. I will leave this like this for now. And let's actually go back and take a look at some of the stuff here. Take a look at some of my other designs and just talk about them. So let's see, where do I want to go? Okay, let's talk about the Inferno. It's actually kind of like a design that I've really liked over the years, ever since I made the original Inferno for Supreme Commander Black Ops. But so first off, what is it? Well, it's got a huge tank here. And that's usually the kind of stuff you associate with flamethrowers, because they need a lot of fuel to throw. And you look here in the model, oh, it's got these. They kind of look like what you'd imagine like a pilot light would be to actually ignite the fuel as it's shooting out. Well, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But then you kind of got to think about other factors of it, like, well, it's essentially loaded down with all this extra fuel. So how do you protect that? Well, there's two ways. You either make it big and slow and just layer it in armor, or you just make it really low profile, so it's hard to see. And like, even if you compare it to the basic tank, it's still like notably shorter. It's very low, and as part of that design, it's actually quite a bit longer too. and it is a bit skinnier actually overall. So okay, so we've got the big tank on there. It's a flame tank. We can see it's not well armored because we can see a good portion of the tank, but it is still low to the ground, so it's going to be really good in like hilly areas because, you know, even just a small hill in front of it is going to block a lot of shots, and it's low profile enough that it can travel even between like shallow hills or ditches and still be protected from being shot at to some degree. And it's long and skinny, so that kind of tells us it's going to be a bit faster. You know, it's not going to be maybe as maneuverable, but it's going to be fast, so it's going to be good for kind of like the shock. And we can also probably assume that because it's all exposed here, it might explode at some point. Particularly if you shoot it to death, it might be a big fire blast. Interesting. Okay. And we kind of, and let's see, what else can we look at? That's another good one. Well, I mean, like let's go here. So we have our Badger. Actually, how big is the Badger compared to the Rook or the old Bulwark? So here it's standing on a base, so that doesn't really count, but if we just kind of pull it down, so we can see, so it's like the two guns here are pretty much comparable, like they're the pea shooters, you know, and that's absolutely fine. Everyone loves a good pea shooter. Yeah, so now it's interesting. So, okay, so basic mech, you know, there's nothing really, doesn't look like there's anything special about this guy. That's cool. But when you start, but the trick is when you start comparing it to something else. So here's another mech. Oh, this one is actually bigger, and it looks a lot bulkier too. And it's got what looks kind of like grenade launchers on there. Okay, so he's kind of got short legs. Like his legs are still pretty short, all things considered. They're very straight, so that it's probably not going to be super fast. But we can tell just by comparison that he's very bulky. He's definitely got a lot of bulk going on, and he looks very stout essentially. And like even like he's imposing. He's got like these little spikes on the sides that go up. He's got kind of like the center fin here, so he looks tough. He looks like he's got a lot to him. And then the weapons, well, they kind of look like grenade launchers because that's what they are. So that's cool. But then what if we compare it to something like the Strider? Well, okay, so it's bigger and it's got longer legs, but they're not really any, like, they're not thicker than this guy's legs. And, you know, and due to the increased size, it looks like it'd be kind of frail, kind of fragile. Okay, but it's got these big long legs, so it's probably faster. And you see it's actually got these pretty big missile pods, which, actually take up a fair amount of volume, like essentially for its entire top half, like its missiles account for like almost a quarter of its volume. So they're probably going to do pretty good. Now, they would probably also be up like this for the most part. So in this case, this ends up being an anti-air missile bot. And it's fast, but it's kind of frail. Okay, that's cool. Oops, go away here. And last mech. Okay, not quite last, but... So, here's a guy, he's definitely bigger. He's kind of got a similar bulk in his chest, but he's got a lot more to him elsewhere. Like, he's got the bigger lower body and the forelegs. So he's probably he's a fair amount more robust than our little Badger guy here. He's got these big cannons on his shoulder, and he's got some little pea shooters on his arms. So probably close range, he's not nearly as strong. He's not going to be as strong as the Badger, but the fact that he can shoot at close range at all where his big guns don't work is still pretty good for him. And then last we have Hammerhead, so we can see, okay, so he's definitely bigger. He looks a little bit frailer, but his guns are bigger. So this guy's kind of like an alpha striker. Like, he does his damage kind of up front, probably fires both guns at once, and he's maybe a little bit faster. But otherwise he's not noteworthy in any other aspect. So you won't be hard to kill if you if you survive, he won't be that hard to kill. So it's stuff like that. Like you essentially like I've always been a believer of like form, like not like form over function or anything like that, but form implies function, or form in yeah implies function. So if basically make it look like it does what you want it to do. Don't just take a design and say this is what it does. So here. Okay, so this is kind of different from the other tanks. It's a small tank, but it still has because like this one had 4 tracks, but as we saw with the redesign we're doing, that's not going to be the case anymore. So now I can say, okay, well this one has 4 tracks. That's a little unusual. And it's got these weird little things here on the side that kind of look like feet almost, but they're up for some reason. Oh, because it has to deploy. So the feet go out, and then, oh look, the gun gets bigger. And, it's got a little blast shield on there. That's different. And then it starts pitching higher and higher. And, okay, it can't quite go all the way, all very super high, but you can clearly see with everything, okay, this is probably some artillery, and it's probably pretty long range because it can't move and shoot at the same time, and it's got a really big barrel. Cool. But then you get here, and it's like, oh, okay, so this one's got 2 tracks. They're a little long though, and it's pretty wide compared to some of the other tanks. Like it's wider. Like the only thing that really compares is the Bulwark, and it's wider still, but it's wider than the medium tank at least. And its gun looks to be kind of the same. It's about the same bore perhaps, but it's got better muzzle on there. Looks like it's a bit more built up. And oh, look at that, it goes really high. Okay, so this is probably another artillery again. This one can probably fire on the move, but obviously that limits it in some way too. Like it doesn't have as great accuracy. And then here it's like, oh well, okay, well this is actually another unit I want to redesign a little bit because it is a little bit plain, and honestly I'm not sure I like how I ended up doing the base, especially for painting because it's actually kind of hard to get in here. But this is kind of really big and blocky, but you can tell it's a hover unit because, well, A, it's off the ground, and B, you've got all these like little engines around it. So that's cool. Missile pods are again pretty big, but what's notable about them is not so much their size as much as the fact that they've actually each got 4 compared to like our other missile unit all the way over here. It's only got 2 on each missile pod. So pretty much this one's got 4 times the salvo density. Yeah, that sounds about right because that's what it is. It fires a lot of shots and it just kind of rains them down on you. Its accuracy isn't great, but it's what it's got. And we'll end with this one because it's kind of the last clear cut. This one's not super clear cut. This is the Cobra, but it's kind of like it was my first wheeled vehicle, and it kind of got to the point where it's like, well, I need the wheels to be big enough to be notable, but I mean, like it's like in the end, it's kind of pretty big. Like it's quite a bit taller than the smaller tank here. Even it's actually one of the tallest. Let's see. Yeah, so if we look down here, the only thing that's as tall is this turret, which is not going to be quite the same anymore. So, but it's wheels, and wheels can definitely go faster than tracks, but they're not going to be able to really do that over super rough terrain. Super rough terrain, and they're obviously not going to be able to turn on the spot because they got wheels. So it's going to be like a good outflanker. Like it's going to be able to get going, but to get it to kind of reach its full potential, you need to kind of take like a roundabout route to avoid rough terrain and stuff like that. And then here we got, this is the Aurora Tank Hunter. So we can see that it's big, but we've got some exposed bits over here. So it's probably not super tough. I mean, the gun is obviously hard mounted, so there's not much. So pretty much it's going to be easy to ambush. It's similar to the Inferno, very low to the ground comparatively. The gun sticks up a little bit, but the actual hull itself is pretty low. Pretty much almost. So if we just check the turret, yeah, see, it's like lower profile than even this guy. But it's still a pretty big tank. It's got skinny tracks though, so it's probably not super, like its tracks are skinny compared to its overall size, proportionally, essentially. So it's probably not going to be a very mobile guy. And it's got a big gun. In fact, the gun is very much a prominent feature, especially on the front. So it's, it's a tank hunter. It's got a big gun. It's meant to punch through and just essentially kill a tank, just one shot kind of deal. And yeah, it's low to ground, but it's still big and awkward. So you're essentially trading ease of use of, like, say, something like a Kodiak or a Sprinter for power. So it's harder to use because you got to aim the whole body at it, at the target. It's vulnerable from attacks from pretty much anything outside of a 45-degree cone in front of it. And pretty much a fast unit could kite it, if endlessly, just by getting around behind it and stuff like that. But it's got all that power up front, so if you set it up properly and like get it in the right position, it's gonna get the kill first. Now, obviously, some of this is more tenuous than others, but I think you can kind of like get the basic point I aim for when I'm designing stuff. Is I always think about what it does and what that would mean for it, because the last thing you want to do is essentially like Mary Sue your unit design. You want to make sure that everything's got its own, like, it kind of like has its own character, like the Sprinter. It's small. It's got like a little. Its cannon is not really that big. It's proportionally equivalent to what the Kodiak has, but it's actually kind of short, really, and but it's got like, it looks like it's got a pretty good engine back here, and it's small and light, so it could be pretty fast. And even though its gun might not be powerful, maybe it's got a little bit of extra range, or it's much more accurate because it's got all these little extra doodads on it. Here we got the Kodiak. It looks kind of imposing. Like, it's definitely wider. It's pretty stout, and the turret is pretty bulky, all things considered. And just the way these kind of ribs go down, it looks pretty tough. And that's kind of what it is. It's a step up from the Sprinter. It's not maybe as fast, but it's got like a nice big cannon barrel to go with it. And pretty much right now, this is the only real heavy tank. I got the Bulwark, which doesn't really follow in line with the Sprinter Cougar lineage, but it's big, so it's got that going for it. Essentially, it's a big thing. Well, the initial design is big tank. It's tough. It's got the plow on the front, so if you're ever dealing with rubble, it could maybe just essentially push it out of the way or something, or clear it. But for all that tenacity and utility it has, it's got like 2 machine guns on it, which they work maybe good against some of the lighter targets that are already frail in their own right, and maybe it doesn't have a lot of overkill because it's got a high rate of fire, but it's, you can't just make an army out of these, because even if you have 20 of them, chances are, you're going to be outranged or just simply outgunned by even a smaller force. So, and especially with the new redesign with the tiered turrets, I'm making shapes with my hands and you guys can't see it. It's going to even exemplify that even more, where it's great against lighter guys and can even defend itself to some degree from surprise attacks by those lighter guys, but ideally you want to work it with, Sprinters, Kodiaks, maybe even actually some Cobras, because they got the grenade launcher turrets, so they're good for clearing out that lighter stuff. Cougars could work for that too, because, who doesn't love a chain gun, right? Right? And, yeah, I mean, there's still obviously a lot of designs I can do, and I do want to do like the quote-unquote heavy tank to kind of complete that the trilogy evolution for the main tanks. But I'm not sure how to do that because I don't want to just make, yeah, because I'm not sure how I want to approach that yet. Do I just want to do kind of like the opposite of the Bulwark, where it's still big and maybe tougher, but not as tough, and just has a really big cannon on it? Do I want to do something that's kind of like something that's more devastating in the short range? So it's got like I don't know how you do that actually. One thing I know because you could do it in the sense of like, oh, it's got like a big short range mortar thing. Kind of like if you're familiar with 40k Vindicator or Demolisher if you're an Imperial Guardsman. And that's something that's doable. Even just like a big, like large bore short range cannon could work. Like large bore, like proportionally comparative to the hull. So if you've ever, well, if you're familiar with Metal Slug, which you probably aren't, its main turret actually has a really huge cannon on it, and you actually don't use it all that much. It's the equivalent of like throwing the grenade as the dudes. But like that barrel, like it's huge, like compared to like what a regular tank is. It's got a huge, like the barrel is huge comparatively, but it's short. Like it's a short barrel, so your turret might be able to twist and swivel all you want, but it's going to be inaccurate or short ranged. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is make it kind of like a cross between like the crack shot here and the Bulwark, where it's big and tough and has essentially like an artillery cannon built into a fully fledged tank turret. So maybe because it's more direct fire, it's slightly shorter range than what the Crackshot has, but it's got the same power into it, and maybe it's better supported, so it's more accurate. I mean, you kind of, that's the thing, like as your roster gets bigger, you have to keep more things in mind when you're designing new stuff. So it's the kind of design I like to do. I like to be able to take that and think through it all and say, I like this and I want to do it for that and this and whatever. So it's cool. We're definitely like where everything's going with all this, and want to do some more of these big guys, but they can take a while because they're actually kind of like a lot of design to keep in mind. And it's it's funny, like a lot of people think, oh well, you have more, you've got more polygons or faces or whatever to work with, so that must make it easier, right? It's like, no. Like, they, like limiting yourself is what really gets you creative sometimes, and that's why doing kind of like these simpler designs is nice, because you have to think like it's very limited. Like, okay, it gets one gun or like one weapon type. I have to make sure that it's distinctive and creates the type of character I want along with the rest of the design. But when you have something, especially in terms of like the detail, like really none of these parts individually are any more detailed than what you'd find on anything out here. But the fact that you've essentially got more parts to work with, I mean, like that's kind of the problem I have with some of the mech designs, is that it's finding that right balance between busy and not, and making it just kind of all work together. Oh geez, my throat's really giving out right now. That's kind of my problem, and this is actually turning into a very long part, so let's just work to end it. That's kind of like my design philosophy, is form implies function, and always keeping that in mind at the varying stages, because you're making a game. It's not really the like strict realism that matters. It's making everything like function in a consistent manner. Like don't say like, oh, we can't do X, Y, or Z because of whatever reason, and then do X later on, and then just say, well, this one works fine. If you can't do X, Y, or Z, don't do X, Y, and Z unless you take the time to explain how you can do X, Y, and Z. Whether because it's something like, oh, well, we researched it and we had a breakthrough, so now we can do it. Or even just simple as, like, it works in this circumstance because of this reason. It doesn't work elsewhere because of that reason. You know, you got to keep all that stuff in mind. And, like, in a lot of ways, like, knowing, even just having, like, a rough idea of what you want something to do. Like, I know I wanted 2 anti-air options, and I'll got to do something with missiles eventually too. But so here we have the area effect flak, which is great for dealing with swarms of slower things. But then here we've got the Gatling gun, which it's got a high rate of fire. It's going to be able to rip apart most things pretty quick if you can get a good bead on it. But it's maybe not as long range as you'd like, which is why you'd also have the missiles, which give you that range and kind of like that first strike capability to help defend against small incursions and weaken larger ones before they get into dealing with these guys. And it's kind of like why I haven't really done the true heavy tank yet, because figuring out how that lineage progresses and how it fits in with the other big units. Because obviously if I just make the heavy tank, equivalent in power to this tank hunter, but remove all of the tank hunter's limitations, like the turret, then what's the point in taking the tank hunter? You either have to make the tank hunter more powerful to compensate, or you just need a better design for that heavy tank to begin with. So it's a complicated thought process, especially as you go further along, it gets more and more complicated. But it's the kind of thing I really enjoy thinking through and planning. And I don't know, sometimes things will just come up and I'll just do it. And then I'll rationalize things afterwards. But I'm always willing to go back and make changes to match the rationalization, or making tweaks to the rationalization to fit with what I've got. Basically, you can't go in one extreme. You always got to find that middle ground, and sometimes you got to make changes on both sides to get the right middle ground. So, all right, my throat is kind of destroyed. I'm out of drinks, and this has gone on long. This is, I don't know how long this part is, but it's probably close to 40, 50 minutes. Well, hopefully that was interesting. No one's going to see this for a while because... Oh, is there people watching? Let's see, viewer list. Maybe. The viewer list only shows me, but that's okay. Thanks for watching, guys. I will be back on Wednesday, 11. I might do a bit more work on the Bulwark off stream just to kind of solidify what I want to do with it and focus on actually doing that stuff in the stream so you guys can kind of see that workflow to it. And I still need to finish up the Barracuda, so that's definitely on the project list as well. But until then, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching.